Okay, so we want to take a deeper dive into the state of U.S.-Canada relations, and for that I'm joined from Washington by Christopher Sands. He's a senior research professor and director of the Center for Canadian Studies at Johns Hopkins University. So thanks for joining us, and let's just start with today's meeting. I'm sure you were watching, based on that meeting between Christopher Freeland and Michael Pompeo. What's your take in terms of the state of U.S.-Canada relations right now?
Well, I think that the U.S. and Canada are fundamentally on the same side. The problem that I've seen a little bit in the way that Canadians have viewed this is they think they're in the middle. There is no middle. You're either on the American side or you're not. And Canada has acted consistent with its treaty obligations to be on the American side. It expects the U.S. then to back it in this escalation of tensions. China is acting like it usually does as an authoritarian state. It will arrest people, it will torture them, it will behave in a very unlawful manner. But Canada needs to understand that it's either on the American side or it's not. And it has so far acted as an American ally, and it expects the U.S. to then back Canada up. I think that's really the conversation that was had today, and you saw the seriousness with which it was taken by Washington, in that both the Secretary of State and the Defense Secretary were there taking this issue very seriously and talking to Canada about some of the options. But there's no question of Canada being in the middle. If it's in the middle, it's going to be in much more trouble. And if Canada thinks it has a choice between the U.S. and China, then it's making a grave mistake in this matter.
But so there are two Canadians who have been detained because of what China sees as the position that Canada has taken here. It's based on the tone of the meeting that we heard today coming out of Washington. I mean, is the U.S., you say, is the U.S. with Canada on this? Can we trust that?
So far it seems that you saw the Secretary of State, you saw also the Secretary of Defense being very clear that it sees China's actions in this matter to be illegal. It also has been very forceful that this Huawei executive, the CFO of the company, has deliberately tried to end Iran sanctions and should do business in Iran in violation of an international commitment, but also a very much U.S.-backed commitment against the Iranian regime. So that's the real course here, that China's company has broken with international sanctions, and the U.S. wants to have a trial and bring whatever appropriate punishments are following a court of law. Canada is acting consistent with that rule of law decision, as Christy Freeland just said in the clip that you had. So it's really very straightforward. China is acting, having first broken international sanctions and tried to deal with a rogue regime in Iran, is acting as though it can now grab Canadians off the streets and treat them as collateral damage, as you said. But the problem is not the U.S. The U.S. has been very consistently in favor of Canada on this, and I think you saw that today. And the problem is that the Chinese are acting in a very bad manner in terms of the international system. And so what we would expect now are consequences that Washington would impose on China for having done so. I expect it will get worse before it gets better, but Canada has got very strong backing from the Trump administration, which understands the stakes, I think, even as the Trudeau administration does as well in Canada.
Right. So you're right. Today from the Trump administration, that is what we heard. But it was a couple of days ago that we heard directly from Trump on Twitter, inferring sort of the opposite, that in fact he might, interfere here, and if there was a economic or a national security interest on the part of the United States. So while Canada, following the rule of law, that tweet suggested that maybe the U.S. wasn't. So I think there's the confusion for a lot of Canadians who are watching this right now.
I don't see there's anything wrong with what President Trump tweeted, and I don't think we should take these tweets necessarily very seriously. What he suggested was this case matters to him a great deal, that the misbehavior of the Huawei executive needs to be brought in front of a court of law, and that if China tries to bust her out of Canadian custody, or there's some sort of release, or she jumps bail and tries to get back to China, that there will be economic consequences for having done so. This is a full conflict between the United States and China. It's a trade war, it's a security war. The U.S. is very serious. It's been very consistently serious. It's been serious from Trump to Pompeo to Mattis, and I think the message for Canadians is you have a very strong ally. Now's not the time to waver, but to recognize that this is a very serious conflict, almost as serious as the Cuban Missile Crisis in some ways, and we need to take that seriously.
What do you make of the perception globally of Canada? Has it changed because of what's happening here, and maybe, I guess, perhaps how Canada has played it, or maybe how Canada might play it, that we're somehow weak, perhaps, and that we're just doing the bidding of the United States? Because we are hearing a great deal of that.
No, I don't think you're doing the bidding of the United States. You're following the rule of law. The U.S. has a lawful arrest warrant that's out that Canada honored. That's not a question of weakness. It's a question of following the rules, which Canadians very much do. I think there was a problem earlier when, in Canada's very proper criticism of Saudi Arabian human rights, Saudi Arabia responded very disproportionately. I think many people rightly said the United States was too silent in not backing its ally in that moment. Here, you see quite the opposite. Canada has done the right thing, and instead of silence, you get from Washington real commitment. The rest of the world needs to understand, and Canadians should not be in any way confused, that they are on a side. Canadians are not sort of independent actors who get to do what they wish all the time. Sometimes alliance has consequences. You're on the American side, you're seen to be an American ally, and you're currently acting like it. I don't think the rest of the world sees anything else.
Very interesting to get a U.S. perspective on this. Christopher Sands, Senior Research Professor and Director of the Center for Canadian Studies at Johns Hopkins University, joining us from Washington. Thank you.